Well, welcome to the Support Center. And it's called the Support Center because what we want to do is be here to support you. And of course, we do that by doing our best to support Tony and then ultimately provide whatever service we can to you. And because there are no cash registers here at 5200 Buffington Road, because the business is in the restaurant. And so we want to be here to support you. Before we do anything else, I think you guys probably know this, but we literally go way back to that meeting in the cafeteria, but to have worked for the same operator, to have gone to the same college. Tony's actually my other brother. He just doesn't know that. So, he actually has a brother in Chick-fil-A, but if I had a brother in Chick-fil-A, it'd be Tony. So we do go way back, and I'm just thrilled anytime that you bring folks here, and the times that I've actually been to the market, get a chance to connect with you guys because of our friendship over all these years. What year did you become an operator? That would have been.
This is 20th year, so you'll see me again next week.
Next week. That's right. God, it's
so
amazing.
it's 98. It's 98.
98. So to be abundantly clear, 20 years ago, we both had more hair. So it was there.
We keep hearing those rumors, but we haven't seen any proof yet.
So I know our time's a little limited, but I want to give you a chance to ask some questions. But if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you guys some questions first. Can we do that?
Let's do that, sir.
All right, so I'm going to ask you the questions, and I'm going to get you to write them down, and then we're going to come back and talk about them together. All right? So here's question number one. And I ask this question of you guys because you're here for a reason. Tony believes you're a leader. That's why you're here. So my first question to you is, what is leadership? What is leadership? You hear that all the time. You're a leader, be a leader, grow your leadership. What is leadership? I'm going to tell you the second question. You probably still think about the first one, but the second one goes with it. What isn't leadership? The first question is, what is leadership? The second question is, what isn't leadership? What is leadership? What isn't leadership? And then the last question is, what is the leader's greatest asset? What is the leader's greatest asset? Or in other words, what's their greatest resource? What can they do to influence things the most? So what is the leader's greatest asset? All right, so take a minute, try to think about those three. What is leadership? What isn't leadership? And then what do you think the leader's greatest asset or resource is?
That's a good one.
These are like essay questions for the SAT, right?
Choose one.
Take about 30 more seconds. What is leadership? What isn't leadership? What is the leader's greatest asset? All right, everybody got some thoughts? So just throw them out there. Just start.
Influence.
Influence. What is leadership? Influence. Good. What else?
Serving.
Accountability.
Ownership and accountability.
Serving.
Serving. Development.
Being able to take someone from point A to point B successfully.
Got it. I like that.
Our people.
What's that?
Is that about people?
All about people. Yep.
I just wrote the serve model.
Our serve model.
Taking action.
That's great.
Okay,
You guys
influence
been at
them.
Chick-fil-A a little while or what? Serve model. Absolutely.
Mostly because the scenes shape the future. Kind of.
Yeah. Got to start with vision.
Mhm.
That's good. Cool. Any other thoughts we hadn't gotten out there? So service, leadership is development. It's A to B. It's the serve model. What else? People. All right, so I'll give you the Tassopoulos theorem of leadership. Some people say I should say the Tassopoulos hypothesis because it rhymes better. But the Tassopoulos theorem of leadership. I think leadership is intentional influence. Intentional influence. Very consistent with the serve model, actually. But intentional influence. And what I mean by that is, when I say the word intentional, what do you think of? What words come to mind? Intentional.
Purpose, on purpose.
Purpose, what else?
Active.
Active, making stuff happen.
Meaningful.
Meaningful, exactly. So purposeful, meaningful, active, goal-oriented, the sense that, okay, we actually are trying to get something done. If there's not a goal, an agenda, a purpose, a cause, a meaning, a vision, a dream, it's actually not leadership. And so to be clear, it starts with intentionality. Okay, I want something to get better. And then the second part is influence. So what do you think when I say influence? What words come to mind when we say influence?
Impactful.
Impactful, change. And who do you influence? Who do
Everyone
you
that you come in
influence?
contact with.
Yeah, really, people all around you, 360 degrees. So influence is trying to see a change or an impact happen in another person. So ultimately, if you're going to lead, you ought to have a vision, a purpose, a dream. And of course, if you're on a team, the more it connects with the overall dream, the more your leadership's going to be effective. And then it's about influence. It's not about just your own performance. In fact, if it's just about you, it's not leadership. Because if you're not helping somebody else get better, you're not really leading, because that's not influence. Everybody tracking on this one?
Okay.
So for me, my definition of leadership is intentional influence. Now, what isn't leadership? What did you put down? What isn't leadership?
Or,
Dictatorship.
Dictatorship,
or self-serving and self-glorifying.
self-serving, self-glorifying,
I said dictation without explanation.
dictation without explanation. I like it. What else?
Somebody that don't care.
I don't what?
Somebody that don't care.
Yeah, I don't care. That's not leadership. What else?
Doing without delegating.
Okay, nice. That's not leadership. All right, you're just getting the job done without delegating. Okay, what do most people in the world think of when they think of leadership?
Management.
Title, position,
Authority.
control. It's like, hey, they're upper level management, they're leaders. Well, they may be upper level management and can't really lead, because ultimately leadership is intentional influence. It is about having a purpose, making something better, leaving it better than you found it, in effect. And influence, it's working through other people with other people. That's not title, position, title on a name tag. That's not leadership. That's just a position or a title. So for you as a leader, actually don't fall in the trap. Oh, I hear you're a leader at Chick-fil-A, and your immediately response is, yes, I am the PM person, or I'm community relations, or I'm personnel. The role doesn't make you a leader. Make sense? It's actually what you're doing to contribute to the team that is the mark of your leadership. And again, it's intentional influence that is the essence of leadership. So how about the third question? So leadership, I'm going to argue, is intentional influence. What it's not is title, position, power, control, authority. What's the greatest asset of a leader? And there's not like just one right answer to this one by any means.
Just people.
People, okay?
Yourself.
Yourself.
Having perception and knowing how to act upon it.
Okay, so having an awareness of what's going on and doing something about it.
In
What
the
else?
restaurant, we say use your brain, not your hands.
I like it. Use your brain. Of course, when somebody messes up, you don't say anything. Use your
Not that part of your brain.
We also say be smart, not stupid. So.
That's good.
I was thinking like your own experience and story.
Say that
Your own
again.
experience and story.
Your own story. What else?
I thought your character.
Okay, absolutely. And ultimately, how do other people see you? What do you do that's so important if you want to be a leader and have intentional influence? Lead by example. Ultimately, people don't worry about what you say. What they really want to see is what?
What you do.
What you do. And actually, people are testing you all the time. And this is how you're going to ultimately either increase or decrease your influence, is do they see consistency between what you say and what you do? And again, what matters most is what you do. Now, be careful, that's not a trap to say, okay, therefore, I've got to do all the work on my shift based on my responsibility. That's actually not leading. It's, you need to be willing to do whatever it takes that you're asking somebody else to do. But if you always do it for them, you're not leading.
You know, Dan this morning picked up a piece of trash and downstairs and I was like, there it is.
That's exactly right.
Leaders pick up trash.
And you know, it's funny, you go on the road with Dan and you go visit Chick-fil-A restaurants, he picks up trash everywhere he goes,
Mhm.
restaurant after restaurant. You go to McDonald's and Arby's and he picks up trash. I'm like, Dan, you can leave those there.
That helps us.
Never. He picks it up everywhere he goes. And he's just leading by example. And he doesn't talk about it.
No.
He just does it. So Dan could talk leadership all day long, but if he didn't see it, it would erode that credibility there is in his leadership. And ultimately, to lead by example, it has to come from your heart. It has to be rooted in your character, because what you're trying to do is you are trying to positively influence others by doing what's right first. Then you begin to think about how does it show up on the team and influence other people. So as you think about your time here at the Support Center, if I'm going to encourage you as you walk away, what is leadership? Intentional influence. What isn't leadership? And unfortunately, we fall in the trap all the time. We think it's title, position, authority, power, control, money, whatever. And then the best asset you have is to lead by example. To lead by example. So, food for thought. Right, questions. We have got about 15 minutes, I think. Yeah. So take 1 second and write down a couple of questions. Write down a couple of questions or issues you want to talk about. A couple of things you want to that are on your mind. What advice do you want? What counsel do you want? What questions have you got?
I can start when everybody else is.
Well, let everybody take 1 second.
That's
No, you're
fine.
good. Let everybody take 1 second to write some thoughts down.
Get ahead of the game first.
No, you're good. Totally
Overachiever.
good.
No.
And you can ask a question about this morning because you were part of something really special this morning. All right, questions? Get to go first.
So going back to kind of your story,
Yeah.
when it comes to, at what point did you realize, okay, Chick-fil-A is where I'm going to be, and what made you commit to that, or is it just an ongoing thing of I'm
That
here
great
because
question.
I'm continually learning and until something else?
Yeah. So I'm planning to hang around.
Right. I figured that.
It's been 41 years and it's been an incredible adventure. So I'll tell you specifically my story. I started as a senior in high school with Gary Geddes. I worked for Gary all through college, and I was a double major in history and political science. I wasn't necessarily a business major or anything like that. And I was somewhat interested in business, but I also thought about teaching school and potentially getting into politics. And so when I got to be a senior in college, I decided I wanted to go to graduate school, and I wanted to go straight to graduate school because I didn't want the risk of maybe kind of getting disinterested. And I said, you know what, if I'm ever interested in business, I need a business degree for me. And so I said, I'll do that. And if I want to get into politics, I still can with a business degree. So I went to graduate school and got a master's in business. And it was in my second year of graduate school, as I had been going to school in Washington. I went to Georgetown University for graduate school, which is in Washington, D.C. And my roommates were all involved in politics. And I had a small apartment and, had roommates. And we would talk about when I was studying at school, we talk about what they were doing, working on Capitol Hill. And here was my net after really spending that time in Washington, was if I was interested in impacting policy, I should get into politics. But if I want to impact people, I want to get into business. Because my sense is you actually impact people more directly in business. And then it was like, well, if I'm going to impact people, why would I not think about Chick-fil-A as a career? Because I'd worked for Chick-fil-A on a part-time basis up until that point. And so that's what I decided to do. And thankfully, I got a job offer here at the support center in the role that's called business consultant. Who your consultant is, Chris?
Chad.
So it's in that role where you have direct contact with operators and teams in the stores. And so that's what I did. And it really reflected that decision that I want to connect with people. So, yeah.
As the business has grown and changed, what has been the most challenging change that you have faced?
The biggest challenge is me. And so here's what I mean by that. The number one challenge in a growing business is to not let the business outgrow you. And so whatever role you have, this is true for every single one of us. Whatever role we have as the business is growing, you have to make sure that the business doesn't outgrow you, your role, your leadership, which means you've constantly got to be working on yourself. Now, as I say that, don't get confused that it's it's all about me. It's actually, you have to think about yourself in terms of your growth so you can serve better. Because otherwise the business is just going to outgrow you. And so read everything you can about leadership, spend time with other leaders, get feedback from your peers of how I can get better. This is why the investment of what you're doing here at the support center is so important, because it can help you grow as a leader. But the biggest challenge is actually not letting the business outgrow you. And I would tell you, this is just as true again for me and you together, but we're part of an incredibly high growth business. And you guys, you're in a busy restaurant, right? But I want you to think about this. You're not only one of the busiest Chick-fil-A's in the state, and you're a really busy store compared to Chick-fil-A's across the country. But I'd argue to say in your trade area, nobody even remotely comes close to how busy you are. You know that no other quick service restaurant does, right?
Yeah.
But even if you get into, get to the mall and other areas, retail, right? You're doing the kind of volume that big restaurants like Maggiano's and Cheesecake Factory, and you're doing that kind of volume. And by the way, they sell alcohol and they're open on Sunday. So they got a little bit of an advantage, right, in terms of how busy they are.
Absolutely.
So think about the incredible responsibility and opportunity you have in a business that's growing the way it is and serving the community the way it is. And because it's so significant, you can't let it outgrow you. So again, kudos to you guys, because the business is the fruit of your efforts. But it's a big business. You can't let it outgrow you. Yeah.
So I'm just going to isolate some people in the room, but a lot of us in our 20s, young
Yeah.
leaders or aspiring leaders,
But everybody in the room is youthful.
Everyone's been 20 at some point. Everyone's
You've
been
already
20 or
lived this and learned. Just one or two pieces of advice for that decade
Sure.
in hindsight that you wish you would have known or grown in or learned in
Yeah.
to prepare you for the next stage?
So I was incredibly blessed, like a lot of people that are operators and staff here, to have known Truett. He had phenomenal wisdom, but it was simple wisdom. And Truett used to talk about the most important decisions. The 3 decisions that matter most in life are what he called the 3 M's. And the first M was who's your master going to be? Who's going to be the Lord of your life? The second is who's your mate going to be? Who are you going to marry? If you're going to get married, who's your spouse going to be? And third is what's your mission in life? What are you going to be called to do? So master, mate, mission. Master, mate, mission. Now, the reality is, obviously you can make the master decision earlier or later, but very often the mate and mission decisions are made in your 20s. Often. Not always, but often. And so I would say, amidst everything else you're thinking about, make sure to come back to, okay, what are the most important questions? Because when you ask yourself those key questions and you think about those key decisions, you're going to be better off. So focus on the most important things in your 20s, and those are the 3 that I think matter most.
So when you're defining mission, what kind of, do you have any resources that you've used that have helped, like with mission or vision of your life or
Yeah.
your calling in life?
So, first of all, one of the things that I would argue is your calling and your mission will be clearer when you begin to learn more about how God made you uniquely. And so any sort of assessment, and Tony has access to all this stuff, but things like what it was called Myers-Briggs, if you've ever heard about that, Strengths Finders or Standout, but there's a lot of assessments, there's spiritual gift inventories, where you learn more about you. Because when you learn more about you, and again, I believe we're all uniquely made, you'll understand more about, okay, what's God calling me to do in terms of the gifts he wants me to apply. So, analytics, I'm the history political science major, right? So don't sign me up for all the math stuff. So I lean towards teaching, coaching, versus we have folks that are so good analytically, and I can't touch that. So I try to lean into those things that I think God's gifted me for and gifted me to do. So really identify your strengths, understand your weaknesses, and I think that'll help you with your calling.
Best
Yeah.
book you've read this year? Or 3.
So I'm going to give you my recommendation on my best books, and then I'm going to tell you about one
You're
that's,
about to.
yeah. So if you've not read a book by Henry Cloud, it's called Integrity. It's just absolutely terrific, and it's about character, and it's more than just character being don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. It's character in the sense of, can you deal with reality? So Integrity by Henry Cloud. Wooden on Leadership.
Heard that.
Coach John Wooden, who was the former UCLA basketball coach. It's great because Wooden on Leadership is all about leadership, but it's from a practitioner. It's somebody who did it, which I think is terrific. And then from a team standpoint, there's a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And if you want to get better as teammates, you can read that book, and it'll be super helpful. 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. What does it mean to really be a great team player? So those are the 3 that I recommend highly: Integrity, Wooden on Leadership, and 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. But the best leadership book is obviously the Bible, and specifically the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament. The book of Proverbs has 31 chapters in it.
You read it every day, one a day?
I read a chapter every day. So,
You know what's really weird about that is, did you tell me that? Okay.
Yes.
I started that in March.
Oh, it's cool.
Because of you, I guess. Your influence over Tony, but yeah.
It's very, very powerful. So I read that chapter every day, and I did it today. And it's super, super helpful. The other thing I'm doing more of is I'm actually reading biographies more. And so I've read biographies of Mother Teresa and Abraham Lincoln, and the next one I'm going to get into is Winston Churchill. And I've read a number of books about Winston Churchill, but my boys for Father's Day, they're like, okay, we're going to get you, Dad, 3 different volumes of the life of Winston Churchill by William Manchester, and each one is that thick. So
That many pages on Winston Churchill.
literally, that's what I'm going to be reading next. So I'll keep you posted on that one. When you come back in 2 years, I'll have
Ask
that.
you
I'll have
that.
that.
There you
Well, we're
go.
getting a remodel in 2 years?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you. Stay on it, man. Stay
Slipped
on
up
it.
on that one.
You got that on camera.
That's right.
One more
All right,
question.
one more question.
For Tim. Austin, can you got your bag?
Yep.
Oh, yes.
Well, we were supposed to be meeting with Jimmy Collins tomorrow, but we can't now.
Okay.
What's the biggest thing, if we were to hear something from Jimmy or something you learned from Jimmy,
Oh my
what would that be?
So Jimmy talked at length about this. He said, you leverage or use personal power, not position power. And he used to tell us over and over again that influence is like a muscle, that the more you use it and use it appropriately, the healthier you are. And if you use it inappropriately, obviously. And here's the story he used to tell about it. And he didn't tell about himself, he told about Truett. They were at a grand opening, and it was super busy. It was a mall grand opening, and new team members working the register, waiting on customers. And there was a young female team member who was not smiling at the customers. And Truett said to Jimmy, "Hey Jimmy, have you noticed that team member over there? She's not smiling." And Jimmy said, "Oh, Truett, I'll handle that. I'll take care of that." Jimmy, by the way, built a career saying, "I do the things Truett didn't want to do." So constantly, Jimmy's like, "Okay, Truett, how can I help?" And he said, "I'll go talk to her." So Jimmy went to talk to the team member, said, "You're not smiling, and you got to smile. The customers expect good service." So a couple of minutes later, they're back. Store's still busy. Truett says, "Jimmy, she's still not smiling." "I'll take care of it, Truett." So he goes over and he tells her again to smile. Comes back a few minutes later, she's still not smiling. So the third time, Jimmy goes over and is like, "You've got to smile because that's what matters to customers." And he goes back, and Truett says, after a few more minutes and she's still not smiling, Truett says, "Jimmy, I'll take care of this one." So he goes over to the front counter and he says, "Every time I look over here, I see you smiling at customers." And he said, just a little bit of a turn of the corner of her lips went up, and she smiled just a little bit because Truett encouraged her. And then a couple of minutes later, Truett went back and said, "See, there you are, smiling again." And she kept smiling broader and broader. And then the end, Truett had done it 3 times. So here's Jimmy, he'd used position power 3 times. And Truett used personal power, influence, encouragement. And by the end of the day, she was smiling all day long as she was waiting on customers. And so Jimmy used to tell that story, and it was a reminder. It gets right back to where we started. Leadership is not title, position, authority. It's intentional influence. It's about actually bringing out the best in others. And that's what Jimmy used to represent, learning from Truett. And he taught us all that. It was great. Because Jimmy, early in his career, was much more of a critic. And by the end of his career, he was a great encourager, and he will tell you he learned from Truett how to move from being a critic to an encourager. So, all right, I'm gonna give you one quick bonus tip. I know I gotta go. So this is super important. This connects Truett. I mentioned John Wooden, who's the coach at UCLA, famous, really greatest. The idea of catch people doing things right. We want to find people, and as they're doing stuff right, affirm them for it. And if somebody's not doing something right, you get no benefit out of pointing out to them all the things they've done wrong. Coach them to what's the right way to do it. So shine a light. So here's the example. Coach Wooden, when he was coaching basketball, he would tell his guys, "Hey, this is the way that you approach the basket. You want to put the ball off the backboard, and you want to cut straight to the basket because that's the highest percentage chance the ball's going to go in. It's if it goes off the backboard and you're running at a direct angle." And when they'd be doing practice and the guys would come all around and they wouldn't use the backboard, Coach Wooden wouldn't stop practice and say, "Okay, you messed up because you went around this way." He would always come back to, "Now remember, when we're going down the court and we cut to the basket, we want to put the ball off the backboard right at this angle." He would point out the right way to do it instead of putting energy against the wrong way to do things. Does that make sense? So if you want to be a great coach, put people's energy and your own towards, okay, what's the right way to do it? It's sort of like the Department of Treasury when they have Secret Service agents that are working on counterfeiting. They don't actually study counterfeit bills. You know what they study? Real bills, so that it can be clear this is what an actual bill looks like. And so it's the same principle. Shine a light on the right way versus put energy on what's the wrong way to do something. All right. Thank you guys. Congrats to
Tim, I
y'all.
know you gotta go, but we wanted to give you a little token.
Oh, cool.
And so,
This is a piece of the old store?
that would have been a good idea. No, over the years, as you talked about, we've interacted quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
And so, particularly in 2009-ish, I was down here, and you were talking about mindset, and you suggested a book, and
Yep.
you didn't just suggest it, you sent it.
Yep.
And some of these people in the room witnessed me in the middle of that time and the change that occurred. But that's actually just an example of the influence that you've had on me, but also ultimately, like you heard Austin,
Yeah.
you've impacted all these people's lives. A lot of people at CFA Rocks and in North Durham. So we got you a compass.
Oh, wow.
And thank you from CFA Rocks. So you've provided us with lots of
That's awesome.
lots of direction and kept us pointed in the right direction. So I appreciate it.
Love you, man.
Thank you.
That's great. All right, thank you guys. Wish you the best, and feel free to come back and visit anytime. And when I come up to Durham, I'll come see you guys. And we do come to Durham occasionally because my wife's at Dookie, so she loves being. So yeah. So all right, see you guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care, buddy.